My name's Scott Galloway. I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time. I have 44 slides in 720 seconds. Let's light this candle. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm actually a global television star. True story. I've had 4 TV series in the last 3 years. 2 of them have been canceled before they were launched, and 2 were canceled within 6 weeks. Let's recap.
If we want to juice this thing, if we want to put a cattle prod out the ass of the economy.
Bloomberg, the most trusted name in financial news. Not for
Why is he shirtless? I've never seen this one before.
long.
I'm going to do whatever I can for this country of ours.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Jeez, come on, dude. You're 0 for 2. Are you stuck?
Face for podcasting. So, first insight of the day, I'd like to be the first person to welcome you to the last TED. Okay. By the way, it's clear, what's it called? What are we here for? The brave and the brilliant. It's clear that Chris is a frustrated soap opera producer. Essentially what we have here is a telenovela where after a night of unbridled passion between Bill Gates and Malcolm Gladwell, they give birth to their bastard love child, Simon Sinek. Okay, I start us with a question. Do we love our children? Sounds like an illegitimate question, right? Well, I'm going to try and convince you otherwise. Essentially, as we go down generations, we're seeing that for the last 2 generations, people are making less money on an inflation-adjusted basis. In addition,
I want to focus on this. This is very important. This is where I feel like a lot of politicians and our baby boomers, they just lectured the younger generation, work harder, work harder, work harder. But you don't see like how much extra work we have to put in to get to their level of when they were in their 30s and 40s and having a family and whatnot. It's much more harder. Yeah, it's not impossible. I get it. But the amount of effort that millennials and Gen Z now have to put in to match what baby boomers went through requires just much more work and hard work. And the earnings just don't add up yet. So look at this on the top right where it says house price to income 3 times the amount. Which means that if your pre-tax income was $74,000, a house is about 3 times this amount of what your income was. So what is that higher math? It's like about just over 200,000, 222,000 to be exact. Okay, so if this is your income and a house costs 220,000 at the time, that puts you in such a great advantage. Your $74,000 a year is so much buying power compared to what Gen Z and millennials have to deal with, which is right here 7 times. So if they're making $56,000 a year, which is much less than baby boomers did, and a house costs 7 times this amount, which is, that higher math says $392,000. So there is a significant difference, which baby boomers were making more money and they had greater buying power because houses were cheaper, while Gen Z and millennials have to deal with lower pay and much more expensive houses. So it's lopsided. So that's why you see a lot of the younger generation get frustrated with baby boomers when they just say, just pick yourself up by bootstraps and just work harder. I mean, you see it on The View. I've heard that before. You see it on Fox News and everywhere else you hear it. And they just don't want to look at the real information of how much harder it is to catch up to their level when they were our age.
In addition, the cost of buying a home, the cost of pursuing education continues to skyrocket. So the purchasing power, the prosperity is inversely correlated to age. Simply put, as we get younger, we're taking away opportunity and prosperity from our youngest. The social contract that is now no longer in place, and for the first time in the U.S.'s history, a 30-year-old is no longer doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. This is a breakdown in the fundamental agreement we have with any society, and it creates rage and shame.
I like how someone like him, who is a baby boomer himself, if I'm not mistaken, has to point this out, right? Like, hey, they have valid excuses and frustrations that things are harder compared to when we were at their age, and that it's harder for 30-year-olds to catch up to their parents when they were in their 30s. And it's just, our protests should be directly at the government, should be in Washington, D.C., protesting how baby boomers continue to sell out the young, put everything on a credit card, and make us the younger generation pay for it while they could live it up.
As a result, people over the age of 55 feel pretty good about America, but less than 1 in 5 people under the age of 34 feel very good about America. This creates an incendiary. Righteous movements, cuts to our society end up becoming opportunistic infections because, generally speaking, young people have a warranted envy, they're pissed off, and they're angry that they don't enjoy the same spoils and prosperity that were provided to our generation.
Very true. And I want to go back here real quick. All this is just a distraction. This is just meant to divide people and distract the younger generation, while the older generations, people, the elites, people in Congress and controlling Congress and the Senate and the presidency, as they just get richer and richer, and they put this in to divide us, where have us distracted by arguing over each other, right? Red versus blue, free Palestine, or pro-Israel, Me Too movements, BLM, remember Occupy Wall Street? Like, all of this was to just distract people to fight with each other. This way they're never united, while the elites get richer and richer and control everything.
Because, generally speaking, young people have a warranted envy, they're pissed off, and they're angry that they don't enjoy the same spoils and prosperity that were provided to our generation. A decent proxy for how much we value youth labor is minimum wage, and we've kept it purposely pretty low. If it had just kept pace with productivity, it'd be about $23 a share, but we've decided to purposely keep it low. Out of reach, median home price has skyrocketed relative to median household income. As a result, pre-pandemic, the average mortgage payment was $1,100. It's now $2,300 because of an acceleration in interest rates and the fact that the average home has gone from $290,000 to $420,000. By the way, the most expensive homes in the world, based on this metric, are number 3, Vancouver. Why? Because 60% of the cost of building a home goes to permits. Because guess what? The incumbents that own assets have weaponized government to make it very difficult for new entrants to ever get their own assets, thereby elevating their own net worth. This is the transfer I'm going to be speaking about.
Okay, I want to go over that because he said some super important information out there. So yeah, minimum wage has always been stagnant. There's a lot of arguments to this, like, hey, at least you get your foot in the door, learn experience. When you develop skills, demand more money or find another employer. Okay, because it's minimum, right? Minimum wage should be for people with zero experience. If you have some experience, you deserve more money or find a new employer. Now, you could say that it should remain low, so more opportunities to entry-level jobs, develop skills, move your way up. Because if minimum wage goes higher, then it makes it harder to get your foot in the door, to learn skills, and move up. Now, those are arguments I've heard. I'm not saying I'm for any of them. So I'd appreciate to hear what people think on that in the comment section. Now, this is also a result of the amount of money printing that has been going on in the past, 5 years now? 4 years? This is the result of it. And because there's so much injection of money and the wages still being stagnant and everything going out of whack in prices, housing's one of them, becomes harder and harder to reach. Gosh, if I had an extra $1,200 a month, you know how impactful that would be? And I'm not the only one who feels this way. Lots of people feels that way too. They could invest that money, start a business, everything. There's so much they could do with that buying power. Now, I just want him to repeat the next section.
Dollars because of an acceleration in interest rates and the fact that the average home has gone from $290,000 to $420,000. By the way, the most expensive homes in the world, based on this metric, are number 3, Vancouver. Why? Because 60% of the cost of building a home goes to permits. Because guess what? The incumbents that own assets have weaponized government to make it very difficult for new entrants to ever get their own assets, thereby elevating their own net worth. This is the transfer I'm going to be speaking about. This has resulted in an enormous transfer of wealth, where people over the age of 70 used to control 19% of household income, versus people under the age of 40 used to control 12. Their wealth has been cut in half.
People 70 and older, people under 40. So what about 40 to 69? Is that everyone here? So meaning the older generation, 70 plus, like our Congress people in government, are getting richer, while people under 40 continue to be poorer and work harder. and still people under 70, right? I'm going to assume this is people under 70, right? Maybe, maybe not, or probably still stagnant. So what, do we got to look forward to we're 70 to get richer?
This isn't by accident, it's purposeful. This is me at UCLA in 1987. I know your first thought is I haven't changed a bit. This is also Mia Silverio, who is the analyst who put together these slides. By the way, Mia is 26. I did the math. Just by virtue of her being in this audience, it brings the average age of the entire conference down 11 days. When I applied to UCLA, the admissions rate was 76%. Today, it's 9%. I received a 2.23 GPA from UCLA. I learned nothing but how to make bombs out of household items and every line from Planet of the Apes. And the greatest public school in the world, Berkeley, decided to let me in with a 2.27 GPA. And that's what higher ed is about. Higher ed is about taking unremarkable kids and giving them a shot at being remarkable. And every year, it's gotten more expensive. Higher ed and homes, and the ability, not only is higher ed incredibly expensive, it's not accessible, because me and my colleagues are drunk on luxury, and I'll come back to that. We've embraced the...
Real quick, I want to go back to that graph. This is very important too. Average admission rate at top schools, 27% versus 6%. I think he said 9%, but still very low, right? So the only other schools are like the party schools, like Arizona State, right? Or San Diego State. College debt as a percentage of the first year income, 31% in 87 versus 53% for present, right? That's a lot. And it's like college has no reason to be expensive at all. They just have this unlimited supply by guaranteed loans from the government, so they keep jacking up the price because there's no reason to stop. Just keep jacking it up, get richer and richer and richer. This is part of the transfer of wealth. It's such a scam. Just so you can, work your way to middle class as one method, because this is what we were taught. Like, oh, get a college degree, you'll get a better job, you'll be able to pay off your tuition. Not anymore. You'll be stuck with this debt plus interest alone to make the payments. It's so far out of reach. And not just how expensive college loans are to pay off, but to get your first house is much more unattainable than it was when baby boomers were around. At this age, house price to first year income, yeah, more than double, or almost double, right?
Ability, not only is higher ed incredibly expensive, it's not accessible, because me and my colleagues are drunk on luxury, and I'll come back to that. We've embraced the ultimate strategy. Me and my colleagues in higher ed wake up every morning and ask ourselves the same question when we look in the mirror. How can I increase my compensation while reducing my accountability? And we have found the ultimate strategy. It's called an LVMH strategy, where we artificially constrain supply to create aspiration and scarcity such that we can raise tuition faster than inflation. And old people and wealthy people have done the same thing with housing. All of a sudden, once you own a home, you become very concerned with traffic, and you make sure that there's no new housing permits. And here is a memo to my colleagues in higher ed. We're public servants, not fucking Chanel bags. Harvard is the best example of this. They've increased their endowment in the last 40 years and have decided to expand their enrollment, their freshman class, by 4%. Any university that doesn't to expand their enrollment.
I'm lost for words with this. Inflation-adjusted change in Harvard endowments versus total enrollment. Now, they're only just calling out Harvard. I wonder what other universities are like, but they only increased their enrollment by 4%. So what the hell did you do with this extra 431%?
Enrollment, their freshman class, by 4%. Any university that doesn't grow their freshman class faster than population, that has over $1 billion in endowment, should lose their tax-free status because they're no longer in higher education. They're a hedge fund offering classes.
Well said. Well said. They have all that extra money. And they're not paying taxes? No. I mean, it's supposed to be a public university, not a hedge fund like he said.
My first recommendation, Biden should take some of that $750 billion earmarked to bail out the 1/3 of people that got to go to college on the backs of the two-thirds that didn't, and give $1 billion to our 500 greatest public institutions, size adjusted, in exchange for three things. One, they use technology and scale to reduce tuition by 2% a year, expand enrollments by 6% a year, and increase the number of vocational certifications and non-traditional four-year degrees by 20%. Where does that get us?
Well, I want to go to this slide. So top third of public universities and $1 billion per school adjusted by size over 10 years. In exchange, reduce tuition by 2%. I'd say go more. Not just 2%. Expand enrollments 6% per year. Okay, I agree with that. Increase vocational programs by 20% of degrees granted. I would say some degrees granted. There's a lot of bullshit degrees out there. I have to say, there's a lot of bullshit that don't matter. So there should be some focus on degrees that do matter, what the country actually needs, that pays well. And with the amount of debt growing, I know this is a side topic. Like, I agree with canceling student debt. However, it's not the government's responsibility. It should be the responsibility by these universities who've been price gouging and screwing with the system that needs to cancel the debt. It shouldn't be the government.
By 20%. Where does that get us? In just 10 years, that doubles the freshman seats and cuts the cost in half. This isn't radical. This is called college in the 80s and 90s. Another transfer of wealth. Look at what's happened to wages. Oh, they've gone up, not as much as corporate profits. There's a healthy tension between capital and labor. For the last 40 years, capital has been kicking the shit out of labor.
This graph right here, this is how you get a generation of college graduates who lose confidence in capitalism and want to focus more into socialism. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a capitalist, but capitalism is not perfect. I will still choose capitalism over socialism any day. However, capitalism is not perfect because the same poison, I guess, across any type of ism, right, is greed. And you have an expressway, or at least they figured out an expressway in capitalism that corporate profits and greed shoot up while compensation of employees just don't catch up at all. People are going to say socialism balances out. No, it does not, but that's another discussion.
Years, capital has been kicking the shit out of labor. Well, you think, whoa, what about wages, right? They've gone up. Well, if you compare them to the S&P, they barely register. It's been an amazing time to own assets, but your attempt to get the certification or the income such that you can acquire assets has gotten harder and harder. In my class of 300 kids, it's never been easier to be a billionaire. It's never been harder to be a millionaire. By the way, our job in higher ed isn't to identify a top 1% of people who are freakishly remarkable or have rich parents and turn them into a superclass of billionaires. It's to give the bottom 90 a chance to be in the top 10.
Provide that opportunity. He said a lot that I want to go over. Sorry for all the pause and whatnot. He said some good stuff. The S&P one. It makes you go, crap, I should have been investing. When baby boomers had their extra money, they're investing in the S&P. They definitely made a lot of money. My worry is now that if you start investing in the S&P, thinking, okay, this is a way to get rich. This over here on the top right, that can always go downwards and crash and you lose all your money. And that'd be another way to transfer wealth or people shorten it or whatever, right? It's never been easier to become a billionaire and it's never been harder to become a millionaire. That's a crazy statement. Because it's like for the elites, it's much easier to become a billionaire. Because like the S&P 500 keeps shooting up, boom, before you know it, you're a billionaire. But just an average person, working class, middle class, to become a millionaire, it gets harder and harder because everything costs more money. You don't have the expendable income to invest to bring yourself to millionaire status.
Of people who are freakishly remarkable or have rich parents and turn them into a superclass of billionaires is to give the bottom 90 a chance to be in the top 10. You know who doesn't need me or higher education? The top 10%. The whole point of higher ed is to give the unremarkables, i.e. yours truly, who was raised by a single immigrant mother, a shot of being remarkable.
Land of opportunity, right? That's why people come here. This is the best place to become something. And there's just more elites just making it harder and harder for those opportunities. That's why I was saying earlier, all the distractions we have out there, you should be marching and protesting in Washington, D.C. and protest against the politicians we have in office right now who are like 70 plus years old, getting rich off you while you're distracted protesting other stuff. But you should really be protesting, hey, the transfer of wealth from you old people who don't give a crap about everyone has just completely went off the rails of like what this country is supposed to be. A land of opportunity, not the land for the greedy.
Transfer has been purposeful. While the cohorts, corporations, and the ultra-wealthy continue to garner more and more of our wealth, we have decided, I know, if they win the gold, let's give them the silver and the bronze and let's lower their taxes. This transfer is purposeful. It's not by accident. And it works. Senior poverty is way down, and we should celebrate that. Meanwhile, child poverty is flat to up. The third rail, I'm going to talk about Social Security. It would cost $11 billion to expand the child tax credit, but that got stripped out of the infrastructure bill. But the additional $135 billion a year to Social Security, that flies right through Congress. And every year we transfer $1.4 trillion from a cohort that is increasingly doing less well to the cohort that is the wealthiest cohort in the history of this planet.
Gosh, he says so much good stuff that I just want to comment on. It's like they keep kicking the can, right? And for us older, not us. Let me take that back. It's like if I was a baby boomer, hey, for our lives would be better. We just have to, send the bill off to the younger generation, have them pay it off, and then they'll figure it out later when they take positions of leadership and government and whatnot. But right now, for the now, let's have good lives, have them pay for it. This is like ridiculous. The annual cost, tax credit expansions, $11 billion, while Social Security, which you see that on your check every 2 weeks that gets deducted as its own item. Sometimes they call it something else, but it's Social Security that we're probably never going to see ever. But, the boomers get to enjoy it right now because, they voted for it. I mean, they're the ones who actually voted and said, yeah, we'll just make them pay it. Oh.
Increasingly doing less well to the cohort that is the wealthiest cohort in the history of this planet. I'm not against Social Security, but the criteria should be if you need it, not whether you have a catheter. 80% of you have absolutely no reason to ever take Social Security. It is bankrupting our nation, and we have fallen under this mythology that somehow it's this great social program. No, it's not. It's the great transfer of wealth from young to old.
Mm-hmm. Also, Social Security, when it was first introduced, was, I don't remember on top of the head, but it was only very selected people who need it. I think it was disabled people, I think it was from World War II, or I think it was widows who lost their husbands from the war. I mean, it was just a very select few people. I'm sure someone in the comments will correct me. Please do so. Don't be a troll, just mention it. But then it grew into this thing where it became like, okay, if you hit retirement age, you get this benefit now. And then it just kept growing and growing and growing, and there's no sight of like, how do we keep this sustainable? It's so unsustainable that it costs more to pay into Social Security each year, and it's something that millennials and Gen Z will never benefit from. But what are we supposed to do? Do we just say, hey, cut it off and just let our elderly not have money? Because we're not going to see the benefit. It used to be part of like the 3 things you can have when you retire: Social Security, your pension, and your personal retirement, right? Pensions are gone. We're not going to see Social Security. So all we're going to have left is our mediocre 401ks. That's assuming the stock market doesn't crash when we're ready to retire.
How is this happening? Because our representatives are in fact representative. Old people vote. Washington has become a cross between the land of the dead and the Golden Girls. Quite frankly, this is...
Hold on, I want to get back to this here. Look at this. People in the House, our congressmen and women, keep getting older and older, and our senators are getting way old. Now, I know there's some debate about there should be term limits. Well, here's the thing. like, I don't know where I position myself in that. Because, yes, you want to keep someone who's good at the job to stay there. However, there can be people who are just straight puppets to the elites who stay there. But, you know, they've been in so much. And if, let's just say they're in a very deep red Republican state, and the elites are just going to, you know, be the donor class for this puppet who's going to run it on the Republican campaign, have his face everywhere, his or her face everywhere on all the ads. And that state's always red until I'm dead type of states. And you're always going to have the same person there. Now, would a term limit even matter? No, they'll just find another puppet. So I'm more in a position of not just term limits, but I think we really need to either get the money out of politics, where there should be a limit of how much money you can raise, this and that. Because, I hate to say it, but a lot of voters are just dumb. There could be like 5 Republicans in a deep red state, but the one who has the most money always wins because his or her face is everywhere. When maybe there's a chance that 1 out of the 5 isn't bought and paid for, but they don't have the funds to have their face advertised everywhere so people don't vote for them because they don't know them. They're like, I just want the red person, so the Democrat person is never in, because last thing we need is a liberal. You know, I hate both politics. Democrats and Republicans, they both bought and paid for. That's my point. I'm neither one of those.
Cross between the land of the dead and the Golden Girls. Quite frankly, this is fucking ridiculous. And if I sound ageist, I am. And you know who else is ageist? Biology.
It's ridiculous, but hey, the American people allow it, right? Too lazy to do the research. They just go, oh, we'll just go with them.
When Speaker Pelosi had her first child, get this, 2/3 of households didn't have color televisions, and Castro had just declared martial law. But she's supposed to understand the challenges of a 17-year-old girl who's 5'9", 95 pounds, getting tips on dieting and extreme dieting from Facebook. She's supposed to understand the challenges that a 27-year-old single mother face. By the way, young and dreamy. Young and dreamy. The great intergenerational theft took place under the auspices of a virus. I know. Let's use the greatest health crisis in the century to really speedball the transfer. This is the NASDAQ from 2008 to 2012. We let the markets crash. And by the way, you need churn, you need disruption, because it seeds and recalibrates advantage and wealth from the incumbents to the entrants. It's a natural part of the cycle. But wait, lately, no, 1 million people dying would be bad, but what would be tragic is if we let the NASDAQ go down and guys like me lost wealth. So we pumped the economy, which again increased the massive transfer of wealth. The best 2 years of my life, COVID, more time with my kids, more time with Netflix, and my value of my stocks absolutely exploded. And who has to pay for my prosperity? Not me. Future generations who will have to deal with an unprecedented level of debt. Why am I here and why?
All this money printing. Like, it was inclining, and then it just blows up like crazy, just nonstop. And again, another kicking the can down the road and let the younger generations figure this out. But for now, let's party. Let's live life on the credit card.
Why am I here and why do I get the prosperity I enjoyed? Because in 2008, we bailed out the banks, but we didn't bail out the economy. We let the markets fall. So as I was coming into my prime income earning years, I got to buy, no joke, these stocks at these prices. This is where those stocks are now. Where does a young person find disruption? When you bail out the baby boomer owner of a restaurant, all you're doing is robbing opportunity from the 26-year-old graduate of a culinary academy that wants her shot. We need disruption. We're economically attacking the young, but I know, let's attack their emotional and mental well-being. Let's take advantage of the fact of the flaws in our species with medieval institutions, Paleolithic instincts, and godlike technology. I'm just going to say, I think Mark Zuckerberg has done more damage to young people in our nation while making more money than any person in history.
It's social media in general. I agree with that. And TikTok is worse. That's why I'm not involved in TikTok. I looked at TikTok and I said, I know where this is going. And you can see it now with all these protests right now, the Free Palestine and pro-Israel protests and everything. It's a distraction again.
Well, wait, what could be worse? It's as if we let an adversary implant a neural jack into our youth to raise a generation of civic, military, and business leaders that hate America.
Yep.
How can we be?
Like, another reason for TikTok is like, there's all these foreign entities. Like, I feel like 90% of the things that people get pissed off about on social media, including TikTok, it was all which is made up by troll farms from foreign nations meant to destroy the U.S. from the inside and divide us.
Be this stupid. All right, this all adds up to a bunch of graphs all headed up into the right. And what are they? What's the first one? Oh, that's self-harm rates, which have exploded, especially among girls, since my colleague Jonathan Haidt pointed out it's really gone crazy since social went on mobile. What's the next one? Teens with depression. The next one, men and women not having sex. Biggest fear of my parents was that I was going to get in too much trouble. My biggest fear, honestly, is that my kids aren't going to get into enough trouble. By the way, my advice to every young person watching this program is go out, drink more, and make a series of bad decisions that might pay off.
I don't really necessarily agree with that, but I see what he's trying to get at. Like, get the hell out of the house, socialize more, get off social media, and just talk to each other, right?
Next graph, cumulative gun deaths. You're more likely to be shot in the United States if you're a toddler or an infant than a cop. Next graph, obesity, way up. By the way, the industrial food complex wants to addict you to shitty, fatty food so they can hand you over to the industrial diabetes complex. We should not romanticize obesity. You're not finding your fucking truth. You're finding diabetes.
I like how he's talking about how bad our food is. I mean, this is a whole other TED Talk and whatnot, because it's so true. Our FDA, the Food Drug Administration, is a complete freaking joke. They let so much BS ingredients get into our food that causes us to be more addicted to food, terrible foods that are slowly killing us, poisoning us. None of it's fresh. It's all BS. It's not even real food. And it's, for some reason, that, the foods, those cheap cracker foods, whatever, I can't even think of which foods right now. They're much cheaper than real whole foods.
Overdose deaths, way up. Deaths of despair. When I was in high school, it was drunk driving. Now it's kids killing themselves. Young people don't want to have kids anymore. 2/3 of people aged 30 to 34 able-bodied used to decide to have at least one child. It's been cut in half. It's now less than a third, 27%.
Why is that? Because everything's so expensive.
As a result, people over the age of 60 in the US, pretty happy. People under the age of 30, not so much. Some of the lowest in the free world. What can we do? Nothing wrong with America that can't be fixed with what's right with it. We got the hard stuff figured out. There are programs to address all of these issues. They cost a lot of money. That's the hard part. And we have figured this out. In just 5 minutes post an earnings call, we can add $250 billion to the economy. We've got the hard part figured out, the resources. We have the money, but we decide not to do it. This is per capita spending on childcare in the United States relative to other nations. This is housing permits. Things are doable. We increase minimum wage to $25 an hour. It goes into the economy. The wonderful things about low and middle income households is they spend all their money. We have to have a progressive tax structure with alternative minimum tax on corporations and wealthy individuals. We need to refund the IRS.
One thing about the minimum wage he keeps bringing up, California is a prime example right now as we speak. They increased their minimum wage, especially for fast food workers. And what are these corporations doing? They're replacing them with automation. Now, people have less opportunity to gain skills. Again, I'm not against increasing minimum wage, but you also have to understand the game that the corporations are going to respond. They're not going to give in. The elites are going to respond. They're not going to give in.
We need to reform Social Security. It should be based on whether you need the money, not on how old you are. We need a negative income tax. My friend Andrew Yang screwed up a great idea, but he branded it incorrectly. Instead of calling it UBI, he should have got Republicans on board by calling it a negative income tax.
My only problem with UBI, I don't believe it works, because if you're giving people $1,000 a month with no reason to get it, no work behind it, that has no value. I truly believe, not to quote Starship Troopers, but anything given for free has no value. So if there's no productivity, but you're just magically given $1,000, it becomes it's really worthless. It's just the same way as printing money. Your dollar becomes less and less valuable.
To eliminate the capital gains tax deduction, when did we decide that the money that capital earns is more noble than the money that sweat earns? Shouldn't it be flipped? We need to remove 230 protection for all algorithmically elevated content. We need identity verification. The reason we can have identity verification is because we have a First Amendment. Break up big tech. We have monopolies that are incurring greater and greater costs on every small business and parents because, again, see above, our representatives don't understand these technologies. We need to age gate social media. There's absolutely no reason anyone under the age of 16 should ever be on social media.
I agree. Social media should be 16 plus.
We need universal pre-K. We need to reinstate the expanded child tax credit. We need term limits, see above Andrew Yang. We need income-based affirmative action. Any visible signs of affirmative action make no sense at all. You would rather be born gay or non-white in the United States today than poor, and that's a sign of our progress and our need to recalibrate who we give advantage to. Affirmative action, of which I'm a beneficiary of, I got Pell Grants, I got unfair advantage. Affirmative action is a wonderful thing, and it should be based on color. It should be based on green, how much money you have or don't have. Expand college enrollment and vocational programs.
He got me there. It should be based on green, how much money you actually have. I kind of believe in that. Actually, I do believe in that.
Programs, mental health, ban phones in schools, invest in third places, big brothers and sisters programs. We need national service. We need to tell people in the United States and Canada that they live in the greatest countries in the world, and we need to remind them of that every day by exposing them to other great Americans where they feel connected tissue. We can do all of this. We can do all of it. We have the resources. The question is, do we have the will? This is my last slide. It is an emotionally manipulative slide to try and get you to like me more. But it does have a message. This is the whole shooting match. Anybody here without kids, ask someone with kids. You have your world of work, you have your world of friends, you have your world of kids. Something happens here, your whole world shrinks to this. So I present, as I wrap here, which is a few questions. One, if you acknowledge that our kids are the most important thing in our lives, that everything else we do here is meaningful, but our kids' well-being and prosperity is profound. If you acknowledge that they're doing more poorly than previous generations, if you believe there's a chance that the illusion of complexity has done nothing but provide cloud cover for the unbelievable transfer of goodwill, of well-being, and of prosperity from young to old, and if you believe we can actually fix these problems and we have the resources, then I present to you, I posit, I augur the question that I hope has more veracity than it did 17 minutes and 24 seconds ago. And that's the following question. Do we love our children? My name is Scott Galloway. I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time.
I've seen a lot of Scott Galloway. He's a great guy. He's brilliant. And I agree with most things he said here. And I love how he concluded. Because he brought it back about, do we love our children? The premise is, like, do we really love our children? Because we keep burdening them. As we're living it up, running things on a credit card, they're going to end up paying the bill. And they have to figure it out some way. Or we just teach them our bad habits, where have them run up the bill even more and have their kids figure it out. And they have to sacrifice more. So this was really a good TED Talk by Scott Galloway. I'm going to leave it there. I think I commented enough, so please comment below. I do read them. Please leave a like and subscribe. Have a good one.